much enjoying Dublin. It's been such a welcoming city to me, and looking forward to having this conversation with you guys today. So I think some of you may not be familiar with MIT Technology Review, so I'm going to tell you a little bit about us. You should be familiar with us, though, because we are for sure for you. So you all are very much in the target audience. We are a media company owned by MIT, independent from MIT, but owned by the Institute. And we publish journalism, not academic articles, not written by scholars. We are journalists, and we are telling the stories of technology. So my team is composed of reporters. They're out there digging up stories about how technologies are being developed, created, and used, and how that's all going to impact all of our lives. Those of you who attended the talk yesterday with Christopher Wiley heard about how tech, you probably knew this before yesterday, but heard about how tech has been used to threaten democracy, public safety, mental health. We write on all those kinds of topics. But we also share stories about how tech is being used for good, too. Our annual list, we do this every year, captures the promise of technology. These are breakthroughs for a reason. And we always look to make sure we're thinking about the potential, the unforeseen consequences of a new technology. So for all of you who are innovators, you're entrepreneurs, you're Imagineers, you're building businesses, you're creating tech's future. I hope this list will be interesting and perhaps a little bit inspiring. So this is 21 years since MIT Technology Review started its annual list of breakthrough technologies. Each year, the team chooses innovations they believe will be game changers, transformative, and that have staying power. So here are some magazine covers from, I don't have all 21 years, but here are some magazine issue covers from those past years. In 2019, Bill Gates came to us and said, hey, I want to choose the list this year. So he did. We said, okay. And that was a bit of a wild ride, which I can talk about another time. So this year in 2022, for the first time, we selected the 10 and then asked our readers to help us come up with an 11th. We gave them some options, so I'm going to share that with you. So before I share the list itself, I have to build the suspense with you all. I'm going to provide a bit of context. So that is the Great Dome over MIT. It's sort of the original building, and it's the most often photographed building on campus. And there's a sculpture somewhere around campus. So MIT Technology Review was the world's first tech magazine, 1899. We have all the archives at in the office. We can go back to the very first issue, as I have done. And the first article in the very first issue is how to set up a laboratory. So we're talking, look back to really, sort of think through how far we've come. But its purpose in the establishment of the publication in 1899 was to tell people who weren't at MIT what was going on there. And in a sense, the mission hasn't changed dramatically, although we are not only looking at what's happening at MIT, we're looking at what's happening in universities and institutions and research centers and R&D labs at lots of different corporations, et cetera. But it's to tell the broader world the kinds of things that are going on in places that they may not have access to for whatever reason. And so today, all these years later, we continue to be very inspired by the scholars, the innovators, and frankly, the geniuses who are at MIT, who are creating the future for all of us. Our editorial focus is emerging tech. Emerging, meaning, not things that, not devices that you're carrying around, not things you probably have in your home in the same ways that, not like devices. We don't look at reviewing the latest iPhone or whatever. We're looking at artificial intelligence, robotics, blockchain, biogenetics and biomedicine, advanced manufacturing and advanced materials, quantum, those sorts of developments. And we're always thinking about how these technologies will impact the way we all live and work. That brings a certain responsibility. We want our readers to be informed to take decisions about technology that they build or decide to bring into their lives in some way. You know, that gets back to the conversation that took place on this stage earlier this morning about, you know, this ethos of build fast and break things. You know, it's really important to us to be thinking about, well, what might get broken here? And how do we help our readers take the right decisions? So today, we are a multi-platform media company publishing in digital on our website every day. We have a print magazine that comes out 6 times a year. We have podcasts. We have this wonderful podcast I just want to point out. It's in the middle and the bottom left corner, which is those 3 tiles are our podcasts. That one is called Curious Coincidence, and it's a short, I think it's about 5 or 6 episode podcast about the Wuhan lab leak theory and the curious coincidence of the emergence of the COVID-19 virus in the community of Wuhan, China, where there's a large disease laboratory. So I encourage you to listen to it. It's really well told. We also have daily newsletter. We have lots of newsletters, but we have a daily newsletter that I want to tell you all about, and then I promise I'm going to get to the list. It's called The Download. It comes out every morning. It's written by our team in London, so our folks in the U.S. can have it when they wake up, and you guys here would, probably have to have it over lunchtime. And I'm going to encourage you all to go to our website, technologyreview.com, and sign up for the newsletter now. If you don't like it, you can unsubscribe in a couple of days, but give it a try. It's on the desktop. It's on the top right corner. On the mobile app, on the mobile site, there's a hamburger menu. Go to the hamburger menu and you'll find it. You're going to love it. So I'm going to draw on the exceptional efforts of my MIT Technology Review colleagues, the reporters and the journalists and the science and technology experts who spend their days uncovering brilliant, weird, disturbing, challenging stories about new technologies. They spotlight these innovations and discoveries that are coming out of labs, universities, R&D centers, and they debate for weeks which ones they think will be the most impactful. So, without further ado, and I know there's been a lot of ado, I now bring you our list of 10 breakthrough technologies, plus an extra, for 2022. So, first one is the end of passwords. So, by now, I think all of us probably know that using the same password over and over again for multiple sites is a bad idea. Also having the password is not a great idea. Picking anything that's really easy to guess. But keeping track of all your increasingly complex passwords is a real drag. And even password managers aren't fully up to the task. They don't fully solve the security problem. So what's the real solution? Well, eliminating passwords altogether, replacing them with things like an authenticator app, run off your phone, or facial recognition. Companies like Okta and Duo are doing this on the enterprise side. Google and Microsoft are making this happen now. So it would mean that you wouldn't actually have passwords. You would have rather other ways of confirming your identity. So I have to say I'm all in on this. I have a real challenge. I've got a password manager. It's a life changer, but I'm constantly fiddling back and forth with it. Oh, did I update it? Is it updated? There's a lot of fiddling. My iPhone has a password manager. I have my own password manager. It's a lot of headache. I'm pretty comfortable with my level of security. It's better since I started that, but the whole challenge just needs to be really rethought. If you think of all the cyber threats we face due to weak passwords as individuals, but as a business leader, I worry about it a lot around ransomware. Think about that, just gone. Number 2 is COVID variant tracking. So the SARS-CoV-2 virus is the most sequenced organism on Earth. COVID variant tracking comes out of the sequencing of the genome of the virus, and it has allowed scientists to spot new variants coming. Databases now display more than 7 million maps of the germ's gene. So in November, a lab in South Africa sent out a warning flare about Omicron. And instantly, or almost instantly, computers in Seattle, in London, and in Boston were able to predict that Omicron was going to be trouble and that it was going to evade antibodies. And so that enabled the public health officials to take certain measures to help us mitigate against the risks of that virus spread. And what happens after COVID-19 becomes a memory. We're not there yet, but we all believe we'll get there. Well, there's going to be future pandemics, and this approach, what we've learned out of COVID, will be used for those. Next is one that gives us much needed hope in the fight to combat climate change, and that is the long-lasting grid battery. So we know that renewables are doing a really great job providing power to the electric grid. In places like, quite recently, in California reported that it had powered its grid with entirely renewable energy for a period of days or weeks. But when the sun sets and the breeze stops, you've got a problem with storing that energy for 8 hours or days at a time when it's not so sunny or it's not so windy. And so you need a battery to store that. And also there are places around the world that don't have the renewable sources at the ready as places like California might. So iron-based batteries are significantly cheaper than the classic lithium-ion or vanadium flow batteries. They can reduce the cost of that kind of storage to as low as $20 per kilowatt hour. So that really makes it a potential, it increases the likelihood that we could power a grid with all renewables. So there's still a lot of work to do. There's work to do on this particular battery in terms of efficiency as well as preventing degradation, but it is for sure an exciting step forward. So AI for protein folding. Wow, okay, don't look at your phones, don't get worried. I'm not gonna get super technical about either AI or protein folding. I'm gonna walk you through it. Most of the things that we do and the journalism that we generate is pretty good for somebody like me to read. I'm probably like you. I mean, I didn't go to MIT. I never was so interested in physics. It was not my thing. And I read our reporting and I feel like, I get it. So that's the level I operate on. We know that proteins are vital for almost everything in our bodies, and how a protein is formed or folded, remember your amino acids from biology, it determines what the protein does in our bodies. But figuring out the structure of a protein is super complicated, and it takes a long time. It can take months to figure out the structure of a protein. And so AI can dramatically speed up the analysis of the folds of a protein and really speed up drug discovery. So DeepMind's AlphaFold 2, has been able to successfully do this for the first time. It's in an open database and used by scientists all over the world for cancer research, antibiotic resistance, COVID-19, and more. There are currently 800,000 entries in it. And DeepMind says it will add 100 million in the next year. That's nearly every protein known to science. So it's a serious game changer in terms of the knowledge that we will have for drug discovery, enabled by artificial intelligence. So next is one you may have heard about. That's the malaria vaccine. Every year, 600,000 people die of malaria. Most of those are children under the age of 5. 95% of malaria cases are in sub-Saharan Africa. In October, the World Health Organization approved a vaccine from GlaxoSmithKline. It reduces the chances of a severe case of malaria, but it doesn't eliminate the risk entirely. It's not that good. It's certainly makes things better, but there's still progress to be made. But even so, it's a game changer, particularly when you combine it with other public health measures for combating malaria. And they're working on a second-generation vaccine now. So proof of stake. This is a method for securing digital currencies. I think we probably all know that classic cryptocurrency securing requires masses and masses of electricity. In 2021, the Bitcoin network consumed more energy than the country of Finland, more than 100 terawatt hours. So that's a lot. It's a big hog for energy. Whatever you think about crypto, we can agree that its carbon footprint is problematic. Ethereum plans to switch to the proof of stake method later this year. It had been planning to. I haven't heard anything change. I think people are still anticipating that, despite what's going on with crypto right now. But the proof of stake approach will reduce the energy use for Ethereum by 99.95%. So really massive reduction in its carbon footprint or energy demand. So how does it work? Well, instead of miners solving puzzles to verify transactions, which is very energy heavy, proof of stake uses validators who pledge coins or a stake to verify transactions, and bad actors get penalized by, and could lose some portion of their stake. So whatever your view is on crypto, I think we can agree that there's going to be some value, clear value in changing its carbon profile. In 2021, we put messenger RNA vaccines on the list of breakthrough technologies. I'm sure most of you have a messenger RNA vaccine in you. I've had 4. Just to be clear, in the United States, the age for the 4th booster is a lot younger than in Ireland, so I just want you to know. So, no surprise, the messenger RNA vaccine did change the world. And in 2022, we put the pill for COVID on the list. And this is here now. It's from Pfizer. You probably know it by the name of Paxlovid. It reduces the chance of hospitalization by 89% by blocking the virus's ability to replicate itself. That's major, blocking the virus's ability to replicate itself. It's major not only for COVID, which it clearly helps. It helps people who are immune compromised, who can't get the vaccine for whatever reason. But if you think about what the benefits could be for other types of disease replication, and it's very exciting. Again, very similar to what I was sharing earlier about the COVID variant tracking. The things we have learned and the knowledge we have acquired through this pandemic, for however, how horrific it's been, for all the lives lost, has actually resulted in a lot of technological advances that will fight future disease and help save many more lives, we hope. So, this is one, practical fusion reactors. This is one that when I first read it, I thought, oof, I'm going to have to understand this one. And so, I'm going to take you through it, take you through the Elizabeth Bramson-Boudreau translation of this technology. Now, limitless carbon-free electricity, we all know that that's what we want. That's the holy grail of climate tech. And fusion power, which is a kind of nuclear energy that does not involve uranium and risks of plant meltdowns and disasters. Fusion power has always been an even holier grail, if there's such a thing. So what is fusion power? Well, at temperatures well above 100 million degrees, I'm saying the temperature of the sun, atomic nuclei mash together and release a lot of energy. That's good. That's a good thing. We want that. Doing this in a controlled and sustainable way could provide us with a crucial source of that carbon-free, cheap, always-on electricity. But doing it in a way that produces more energy than it consumes, like a lot more energy than it takes to make that reaction take place. To do that, you need some very, very powerful magnets to confine the gas of the ions and electrons, which is called plasma, in the reactors. And magnets that can do that at the scale that that would result in a net positive benefit are really hard to create. Those magnets are hard to build. But one company thinks they have solved it, and a lot of other people agree. That company is called Commonwealth Fusion Systems. It happens to be a MIT startup, coincidentally, although, as I mentioned earlier, we write about lots of different institutes and universities and are entirely independent in our research and our journalism. But Commonwealth Fusion Systems has developed a novel magnet that can make widespread practical fusion reactors a reality. They're building a factory right now to produce these magnets at a mass scale, and they hope that as a result of that, that creation of the magnets and deploying them more broadly, they hope that they can deliver fusion energy to the electrical grid by the early 2030s, so in the next 10 years. So it's a longer-term bet. And what's very interesting is when you look at these kinds of technologies, these kinds of developments, things like fusion energy that take a long time to develop, often the venture world, the venture community, isn't behind it because it's a long-term bet. 10, 20, 30 years, and it could fail, right? So it's very risky, and the reward is unclear. So what will happen is the venture community will sort of say, well, what about enterprise software? Which is, great, nothing against enterprise software, but it's not the kind of big game changer that, these sorts of societal problems are calling for. So it's very interesting when you see these sorts of they call them deep tech, these sorts of deep tech developments getting funded, as Commonwealth Fusion Systems is very nicely funded, very well funded, to see the ability that kind of relaxation of investment standards can allow in terms of taking big, game-changing, world-changing bets. So I suspect that you all know that AI, for all its exciting promise and the wonderful things it's doing, including in this presentation, things I've already shared, that it carries some heavy bias, or baggage around bias, because of the data that it uses, which reflects an inherent bias in our societies. So synthetic data for AI, we've put that on our list. It's data that is created to fit certain parameters without including the bias. So you use data to generate, for example, artificial images according to your wishes from scratch. And you use that artificial data, created data, to train the AI. So you can eliminate some of the societal bias that comes through if you take data that comes from the real world. So this is possible thanks to generative adversarial networks. That's a kind of AI that generates realistic but fake examples. So in addition to progress in the fight against AI bias, synthetic data is also useful because there are certain situations where using the data that it does exist is problematic because of privacy issues. So it could be healthcare records that folks don't want, that we have certain guidelines around the use of health data or financial data or things of that sort. So I think you're going to start seeing a lot of use of this sort of synthetic data, and you're going to start to see a lot more development advancing in that direction. Now, last on our list, I love this one. I also love it because when we published the print magazine, we did this wonderful photo essay, and that's one of the photos from the photo essay. And it's a carbon removal factory, which I have to say sounds awesome. It's just opened in Iceland. It's a company called Climeworks. And this factory here can capture 4,000 metric tons of carbon dioxide every year using large fans that suck the air through a filter, and materials bind with the CO2 molecules. So our article about this was called Scrubbing the Air. So I think that sort of says it all. A second company called CarbFix mixes the carbon dioxide with water, pumps it underground. There's a reaction with basalt rock, and it turns it into a stone. The whole plant is carbon-free, and it runs on energy from a geothermal power plant nearby. The only problem with this is that 4,000 metric tons of carbon dioxide is not very much. It's about as much as the emissions, it's about the emissions of 900 cars. So it's a drop in the bucket, but more and larger factories are being built, and the hope is that we can realize some scale economies within 10 to 15 years, and we could start to see really dramatic impact from this. So that's it. That's our list. That's our 10 for 2022. But I promised you an 11th And we had never done this one before, this 11th. So we gave our audience 4 choices. We said, pick amongst these 4. Here they were. AI-powered robots, because who doesn't love a robot? I love a robot. The Metaverse, NFTs, or non-fungible tokens, or aging clocks. And I am going to ask you guys, if I said AI-powered robots, the Metaverse, NFTs, or aging clocks, I want to see, by a show of hands, a completely unscientific approach. I want to know how many people would like to know about AI-powered robots. Okay, all right. Okay, all right, how about the Metaverse? Okay, we got more for the Metaverse. All right, how about NFTs? Okay, so far I think we're at Metaverse is number 1. And how about aging clocks? Ha-ha! You all did exactly what our audience did. Aging clocks gave the highest. We were really surprised. I think we all thought it's going to be the Metaverse or NFTs. That's what people are going to want to hear about. So I'm going to tell you about aging clocks. So how old are you really? You know, I think we know that sleep and stress and diet, that influences how well our organs cope with the wear and tear of daily life. Your biological age might be very different from your chronological age. Hopefully that works in your favor, but it might not. So biological clocks use biomarkers, taking various data from our body, things like white blood cells, things like blood glucose levels, to determine how well various organs in the body are functioning. Researchers then analyze how those values change over time to predict life expectancy. You know, I think there's something a bit, a bit eerie, I guess, about the idea of an aging clock. But I suppose, you know, it's one of those things where the better informed you are, the more likely you are to be able to take action. But there's something, I think, perhaps that makes all of us a little uncomfortable to think about, for example, going in for a clinical health check, you know, seeing your doctor, having the blood pressure taken, you know, maybe your cholesterol levels tested, and also having the doctor tell you, you know, how old your body is. There's something a bit sobering about that, but the idea is that it would help us understand how fit and healthy we are and what actions we might need to take to reverse some of the negative impacts of the stress, the diet, and the sleep levels and all of those things. So those are coming. I happened to read an article just yesterday coincidentally, about aging clocks, that there are, folks, there's a lot of extraordinarily wealthy individuals in Silicon Valley who spend a lot of time thinking about how not to die. And so they spend a lot of time and money figuring out how can I extend my life? And there's all kinds of wacky stories. But there is this aging clock technology is being really developed by some of those folks. And so when it gets to the rest of us, I don't know, but it is definitely coming. So I hope you found that list interesting. Our team absolutely loves working on it each year, and it does generate a lot of interest amongst our readers. I hope it inspires you. Maybe it challenges you in some way. But most of all, I hope you think about the cutting-edge technologies you're building and using, and how your work and your time and energies can be used to serve the greater good and the society that we all live in. I think the idea of the greater good fell out of favor for a while. Again, going back to the discussions we've heard about moving fast and breaking things, and the risks and challenges of social media and the data we're leaving out there all over the place, being used for nefarious ends. And I'd love to see this idea of the greater good come back. I think it exists in many of the folks who are building these innovations that I talked about here. And I think you tech leaders can take a really active role in making that happen. And I can't wait to see what you all do. I hope to read about you all in MIT Technology Review. So thank you very much for coming and for inviting me to be a part of this event.